Good evening and welcome to Domination Submission Radio. I'm your host, Mike Mackay, and I'm your host with the most DS, BDSM, kink, and fetish talk on Blog Talk Radio. I also happen to be the author of upcoming book, Domination Submission, the BDSM Relationship Handbook, which will be available in paperback on Amazon.com in about 2 weeks. And a week later or so, you should be looking for it in ebook format for Kindle and other e-readers. Let me tell you how you can be a part of this show. This is the show where we talk about DS relationships as well as BDSM whips and chains. I think that it's a very important part of the lifestyle, which is somewhat underrepresented and talked about. So we talk about it here. We talk about relationships and the whips and chains. You can be a part of the show. The number to call in if you want to give us your opinion or ask a question is 347-857-1862. Let me give you that number one more time. Write it down. You know you're going to call sooner or later. 347-857-1862. There's also a couple other ways you can participate as a part of this show. We do have a chat room, online chat room at Blog Talk Radio. If you have registered for a free account from Blog Talk Radio, you can scroll down to the bottom of the page as you're listening to the show and you'll see our chat room. And if you just happen to be a little bit shy about calling in and asking your question or making your comment, you can type it out in the chat room and we will try to get it live and on the air and answer it for you that way. So even if you're shy, you can be a part of the show. Also would like you to check out our website. The website is domination-submission.com. Domination-submission.com. There you'll find information about the book, and you'll also find some information about how you can follow us in social media like Twitter, Facebook, and the like. Appreciate it if you would do that. Also, if you're listening to us at Blog Talk Radio, if you look at the upper left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a little button there that says follow. We'd love it if you'd follow us on Blog Talk Radio. That way we know you're out there. And the more followers we have at Blog Talk Radio, the more publicity that we get through that venue, and that'll just mean more attention and more listeners for the show. So you're doing us a great favor by following us, and that way you also will get some reminders of when we're going to be on the air. So last week, we were missing a big part of the show, and that's my co-host, L.B. Shaw. L.B. Shaw is the author of the Trust in Me erotic fiction series, which is available on Amazon.com, and she's about to release a new book called Becoming Stone, and she was sick last week, but she's back this week, and we're glad she is. How you doing, L.B.? How you feeling?
I'm feeling much better, thanks. You've been doing good?
I felt really bad about you being sick. I was going to send you flowers, but, then I remembered you got a really jealous master, and I'm broke.
Yeah, he might.
He
might question that. That's a nice thought. I'll take the thought of the flowers.
It's the thought that counts. So this subject that we have tonight, and by the way, for our listening audience, our subject tonight is training doms and submissives. The subject was suggested by LB. Tell me what made you suggest this as the topic.
Oh, no, you're going to put me on the spot. I guess just thoughts for myself and my own personal life, because my husband and I, as you know, participate in BDSM activities, but I guess we're kind of struggling with the lifestyle aspect to some extent. We communicate and all of that is great, but I think it's just kind of finding our place and figuring out what strengths or what characters we can bring to the table as far as pursuing a full-time DS relationship. So, I think the thought just kind of popped in my head, like, training a dominant, training a submissive, and is that something that can be done if it's not something that comes naturally? I guess that was kind of my thought process when I had mentioned it to you.
Mm-hmm. And have you got any preconceived notions about the answers to those questions?
I do. I think that people can be dominant or submissive as far as learning how to when it comes to BDSM activities. I think that would be pretty simple. But as far as having a lifestyle, I think that those core personality traits have to be there. I believe that we have personality traits present at birth, and I think that we can change our behavior to suit needs and that sort of thing. But I think that if you're not naturally dominant, naturally submissive, that being that way full time would probably be somewhat of a challenge.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be talking about some very big issues here, and feel free to narrow them down just a little bit if you have specific thoughts on specific parts of this topic, because this topic really encompasses a lot of different things when it comes to the DS and BDSM lifestyle. Some of the questions are going to be really big picture questions, and some of them are going to focus like a laser beam on specific parts of this issue. And feel free to either address the big picture or the narrow focus. And as for me, I'm going to keep my biases, my thoughts close to the vest until we're in the last segment of the show. So stay tuned for the last 20 minutes of the show, and that's when you'll get to hear what I think about this particular topic. And I have some pretty controversial thoughts on this subject myself, and that's why I save it for last. That way you can't argue with me. All right, so some of the questions that we're going to be considering tonight are, first of all, are some people naturally dominant or submissives? Are you born dominant, or are you trained to be a dominant, or is it a combination of the two? And same thing with submissives. Is there such a thing as a natural submissive? And if so, does that mean that some people are just naturally never going to be good at that sort of thing? So those are some interesting questions we're going to ask. We're also going to explore the notion of whether or not DS is a skill that can be taught. Now, as you just said a little bit ago, LB, obviously you can teach somebody BDSM. Here's the whip. This is how you swing it. This is how far it reaches. This is how much it hurts. You can teach those things. Those are technical skills that anyone could learn, really.
Right.
But the question, but the real question here tonight for you and I and anyone who calls in and all the people out there listening is, can you teach DS, which is domination and submission relationships? And then finally, I guess one of the other big questions we're going to ask is, if training is a viable way to produce a dominant or submissive, then what's the best way to train somebody? Or what's the worst way? Is there a best and a worst way? Or is it entirely unique between every DS couple based on the nature of their relationship? So I think that's going to be, those are some tough questions, don't you think?
Yeah, that sounds, I've got some thoughts on all of that. So,
super.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear them. So let me remind our listeners one more time how they can call in and tell us what they think on those questions, and questions that we haven't even thought of asking yet. Feel free to add your own big picture or laser-focused questions. The number to call in if you have something to say on this topic is 347-857-1862. Again, 347-857-1862. You can also call us using Skype if you like. And we will be back in about 1.5 minutes after this little musical interlude to take your calls and discuss this topic further. You're listening to Domination Submission Radio with Mike Mackay and LB Shaw. We'll be back in about 1 minute. We are back. You're listening to DS Radio, Domination Submission Radio. My name is Mike Mackay. My co-host is LB Shaw, and we are talking about dominant and submissive training. And this is a pretty controversial topic, both in and outside of the lifestyle, but even more so in the lifestyle, because there's just so many different ideas on it and different ways to do it. LB, how about you? Have you really had any opportunity to talk to anybody who does training, or have you considered training yourself? Come up against this topic at all in a personal way?
I haven't talked to anyone that does any sort of training, but that would probably be the route I would prefer to go if I was going to go through something like that, is finding a mentor or someone. And I know my husband and I have talked about it some, just because I've stumbled across, training information on websites. Of course, you don't know what to believe, really. But, of course, I've joined FetLife recently, so I try to network with people there. But I honestly don't know of any other way to be trained. I mean, people talk about workshops and things like that, but I think you have to be so careful because you don't want to land in the wrong hands, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is a very touchy subject because, of course, a lot of dominants really pride themselves on this whole idea or this whole notion of, I train submissives or I mentor other people and that sort of thing.
Right.
And, of course, one of the first things that somebody who's relatively new at this does is try to establish their credibility in the lifestyle. And then one of the ways you do that, I guess, is to portray yourself as a trainer of others in the lifestyle. And so you have an awful lot of people out there who will put up a website, call themselves a submissive school or a dominant school or a
right.
DS Academy or something like that, and you really don't know. I mean, this, for all you know, this is a 13-year-old kid in his mother's basement, but the things that they're talking about are very, very important. Not just very important, they're very serious.
Right.
I'll just give you an example. I was browsing a website yesterday on this topic, and it was a website on how to train submissives. And it had this big checklist of things that you must do if you're going to be a dominant who's going to be training a submissive. And, there are all these questions, and it had these, diagnostic tests, the Briggs-Meyer personality test. But some of the questions were things like, how much weight can she carry?
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, are we training a submissive here, or are we training a pack mule? It
kind of makes you wonder if they're going to be piling bodies on top of the submissive neighbors. I don't know.
I don't know. But the point is, in fact, there was one bit that just really made me laugh on the website, and that was where whoever this person was trying to impress upon the readers just how very important it was to ensure that you know what you're doing when you're training a submissive. And he said, because if you don't, terrible things could happen. And he lists the terrible things: loss of your reputation, loss of time, and frustration.
Right. Well, I think there was something also about the submissive and what would happen if her family or her employer found out. And I think that's something that the submissive probably should consider beforehand. I think it's good the dominant would take that into consideration. But, yeah, there was it was almost too much information. Well,
but I think the important thing here is that here you had somebody who was passing themselves off as an expert in how to train submissives, and he wasn't able to grasp that this is serious stuff for the submissive. When a submissive puts herself in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what he's doing, she could be injured, she could be scarred physically, mentally, emotionally, for life. And yet this guy's like, the worst that could happen is you'll get frustrated. And you have to wonder about people like that. You really do, because this is serious stuff. And you're messing with somebody's life here when, theoretically, obviously people go into the lifestyle sometimes who are not entirely sincere, maybe, or not entirely committed to it, or maybe they're just dipping their toes into it to see if it's something that they're going to like. And that's normal, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that it's really easy for a novice trainer to not have a full appreciation of the absolute magnitude of the havoc that you can wreak in somebody's life if you don't know what you're doing or if you're doing it wrong.
Exactly. Well, I have a question.
Sure.
If a submissive is being trained, would it not be more beneficial for her to be trained by someone who's going to be her dominant? And I'm just thinking, for example, me and my husband. Why would I have someone else train me if I need to be trained to do what my husband or my master wants me to do? Shouldn't he go through training first and then I get training from him? Because I know that other submissives get trained by dominants that aren't going to be their dominant.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great question. It's a question that we were asked in a show a couple of weeks ago, if you'll recall, when they asked us, what is the utility of being trained by somebody when my ultimate dominant later on is going to be a completely different person who likes different things?
Right.
And that's a really good question.
It's a mindset.
Yeah.
Maybe training on the mindset and I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of it right there is, well, first of all, that's a very valid question. it makes perfect sense. And the answer, the most logical and simplest answer is you're right. You don't want to train to personally make this guy happy if you're going to be the property of that guy over there. It just makes no sense at all, it's particularly considering that, dominants are like snowflakes. No two are alike. And so if you focus too much of your efforts on personally pleasing a specific dominant, you are really setting yourself up for failure if your intent is to be generically a submissive, not specifically that person's submissive.
Right.
And the same thing with dominance. If you are somebody who wants to be trained as a dominant, you don't want to be trained as a specific type of dominant or a specific type of person's dominant or in a specific dominant role. There are a lot of dominant roles. It's just not. There isn't just one type of dominant. There are.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there are sadistic dominant, femdoms. There are female doms, male doms, bear doms. I could go on and on and on. Oh, yeah. In the chat room, somebody says daddy doms. Okay, yeah, they're daddy doms too. But when it comes right down to it, you're right. It's the mindset. It's not the technique. It's the mindset. And you can teach somebody to swing a flogger. You can teach somebody to be aggressive. In fact, I saw another website today, about, it was entitled How to Be a Dom. How to be dominant and get everything you want in life is basically what it was. And it was. And it literally advised people to be aggressive and to stand up for yourself and to be an aggressive negotiator for everything that you want. And, it really sounded a lot more like a Tony Robbins.
Domineering.
Well, no, it sounded more like a Zig Ziglar, how to be successful in business kind of website.
Personal development.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah. But it was couched in these terms. It was like, be a dominant and get everything that you want. Don't let people walk all over you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if that's not your real personality, if it's
exactly.
If it's a facade, people are going to see through that in a heartbeat. They really are. Yeah. There's nothing more obvious to everyone than somebody who doesn't have those qualities deep within themselves trying to emulate them, particularly when they're trying to emulate them to get something out of you.
That's just manipulative.
Yeah, it's not only manipulative, but it's phony and manipulative, which is even worse. I almost can't blame somebody for being manipulative if they are at least being themselves manipulative.
Right.
But if somebody is pretending to be somebody while they're manipulating you, that's even more crazy and a little bit more repugnant to me, I think. So tell me what you think about this, LB. Do you think there are certain people who are just not suited for this lifestyle at all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think when I think of core personality traits of dominants and submissives, and of course these are just what I envision. When I think of a dominant, I think of someone who's very responsible, someone who is disciplined, and they have a need to control their environment and their surroundings and not necessarily control people around them, but I think as a natural consequence of needing that stability in their environment, they end up controlling the submissive for that reason. They absolutely cannot be lazy. And if they don't care about these things, if they're not naturally like this, then I think what happens is they can learn the techniques, but it's not going to stick. They're just going to end up going through the motions if they try to live that lifestyle 24/7. And so, yeah, and with submissives, I think they of them as being eager and willing to learn and to please, and intelligent and respectful and honest and ability to communicate. And so I think just natural leaders and natural followers. I think of a dominant as somewhat of a natural leader and submissives as natural followers. I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily say that they all kind of fall into that category, but those are just my thoughts on their general traits. And I think that if you're not like that, it's probably gonna just go against the grain of who you are, and it's not going to be something that you're going to enjoy. You're not going to be happy.
Even if somebody is naturally a submissive or a dominant, and we haven't actually delved too deeply into that subject yet, but let's say somebody is naturally submissive or dominant, do you still think they could or might not be suited to be trained in this lifestyle?
If they're naturally dominant and can they not be trained? I guess so. I mean, I guess it would depend on their attitude maybe and who they're with, and I guess a lot of different factors would come into play. Some people are naturally dominant, but they don't, maybe wouldn't be fulfilled unless they were with the right person. I don't know.
You come up against a few challenges, I think, in that regard. For example, I think somebody could be a natural dominant, could have been dominant all of their lives, know nothing about the lifestyle. And when I was young, that was me. I didn't really learn a lot about the lifestyle until I was in my mid-20s, I'd say. But I was naturally a dominant my entire life, and all of my relationships were DS relationships. I just didn't know that it had a name. And consequently, I think that there are a lot of people out there who are maybe living a DS lifestyle and not even know it. They may be very dominant or very submissive and never even realize that there's a name for that and that there's a lifestyle built up around it. And just imagine, if you're a natural, hardcore dominant, you don't like to be told what to do. You don't like to be told.
Yeah, that's going to be my next thought.
You don't like to be told you might be wrong. You're pretty hard-headed, probably, and so.
Well, they might have trouble communicating.
That too. So I think that there may be an awful lot of people out there who are not only suited for the lifestyle, but possibly even living the lifestyle and not even realizing it. They may actually be in a dominant, submissive relationship without even knowing what the name for it is, and yet they might be completely unsuited for training because they don't want to be told how to do what they do or what to think or how to behave or any of those things. I think there's also going to be people on the submissive side. I think there are going to be people who may be naturally submissive, but they just don't take to training very well. And I've seen people like that. I think a good example is somebody who is so eager to please as a submissive, someone who's so eager to please that the mere hint that they might be doing something wrong just sends them into an emotional tailspin. Ever know somebody like that?
Oh, I've known people like that. I don't know if they were submissive, but yes, absolutely. If they're not confident and secure with themselves, they can. I think they could probably crumble pretty easily. And there are people that are very fragile like that, and that doesn't mean they're not submissive, but how well are they going to function in a DS relationship? Probably not very well. And this reminds me of a lunch I went to a few weeks ago, and just talking about dominance, and they were going to get ready for this parade, the Pride Parade, and somebody said, well, you can't tell a dominant what to do. And one of the girls said, oh, no, you'd be amazed, the dominants that come and help out, they're like, what can I do? They're ready to help. They don't mind taking orders to help out. So I thought that was a really interesting point that she had made. That she had corrected this other guy that said, oh, you can tell the dominants what to do when they're there to help. I think that's really awesome.
Well, I think it's a common misconception that people have. I saw something in social media the other day about some woman, a submissive, had posted that she will never call another guy sir except her master. And I replied, I spent 20 years in the Army, and it's been several years since I got out, and I've called thousands of people sir, and I'm a dominant. I don't think it implies anything other than respect. In fact, I called somebody sir today. I just thought it was something nice that he had said to me. I said, thank you very much, sir. I don't think that diminishes me one bit. And the same thing with
ma'am.
You're talking about people who don't like to be told what to do, and this image of a dominant is somebody who expects to be waited on hand and foot. I think that's a huge misconception. I think the dominance by the people who jump in there and pitch in and set example and lead the way on what everybody should be doing. And that's the difference between leadership and bossing people around. Anybody can boss people around, but leadership is where you get people to want to do what you need them to do, and that's not easy. Okay, so we are going to come back in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break again, and when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what personality types may or may not be suited for this. We're going to talk about some activities and methods, maybe what's off limits in training, what works, what doesn't work for training. We're going to talk a little bit about mentoring, and hopefully we will take your calls. If you're interested in calling in, letting us know what you think, call us at 347-857-1862. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. You're listening to Mike Mackay and L.B. Shaw on Domination Submission Radio. back. This is Mike Mackay. You're listening to DS Radio. We're talking about Dom and Sub training, and we'd love to hear what you have to say on this subject. The number to call in is 347-857-1862. I have here in my virtual studio L.B. Shaw, my co-host, and we're about to bring on a caller who might have something to say on this, and this is Sweet Geek Goddess out in the middle of the Wasatch Mountains, in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. How you doing there, Sweet?
I'm doing pretty good. How's things going for you guys out in the East Coast?
Well, I'm in the middle, and LB's on the East Coast, and you're in the Rockies. We just need somebody from California to call in now.
That'd be awesome.
And so tell me, what thoughts do you have on this subject? I know that this is something that's near and dear to your heart, Sweet.
Well, as far as training, I think it's really important that, first of all, the dominant knows what he or she wants. I think a lot of times where things get real confusing is if the dominant doesn't have clear ideas of what their expectations are. And granted, I think there's a little bit of fluidity that happens within any relationship. But if a dominant clearly knows what they want and are able to communicate that clearly to the submissive and then establishes protocols and rituals to enhance that relationship, and as if the submissive is willing to meet the dominant, their needs, and has a desire to truly serve, then I think that's really all the training boils down to, and making sure that communication is really clear. I think that's where things really, really bog down and get confusing. And then, too, if a submissive doesn't know what the hell what they're looking for, or not really sure that style of dominance is going to work for them, then things can get icky. And, of course, there's a bunch of negotiation in between. But, yeah, I think that the dominant, first of all, needs to know what the hell they want.
Well, absolutely. Have you ever trained anyone, Sweet?
No, I am truly service submissive. I mean, the only training I've ever done is raise 3 kids that are gainfully employed and good citizens and a dog that does tricks.
Now, do you consider yourself trained?
Yes, in the sense that my dominant has expressed his wants and needs and desires fairly clear. And is it like formal training, like Story of O? No, we don't have that kind of dynamic. But as service-oriented as I am, as our relationship developed, it was just a natural thing to do, is to be observant and to seek out those things that I knew that would make him happy. And then he expressed, like, for example, his preferences for food, how he wants his meals prepared, how he wants the household run, and then he pretty much turns it over to me and I make it happen. Mm-hmm. So is that training? In our case, it was pretty easy. He knew what he wanted, and I had a real desire to serve, and it just work. There are some certain protocols that we do to get ourselves into headspace, play certain rituals. But as far as a big, long, lengthy manual of rules that I have to follow, that kind of style of training would not work for me. So if you could imagine me as a dog breed, if you imagine submissiveness, I know I'm going to probably get a major shit for this, but imagine if you have dog breeds, if you will. There's certain personality types that go within different dog breeds, and people are very similar. You have the little lap dogs that want to just sit around and be petted. You've got the working dogs that want to get in there and very active minds and want to get in and do. And then you have every specter in between. And I think people, in a sense, are kind of like that, in the fact that there are some styles that are going to work much better. A heavy hand for me would not work because I don't do well in that level of authoritarian. While other submissives would do very well with a strict manual. In fact, I know one submissive here in the Wasatch area that has a 15-page manual of daily protocols that she must follow. 15-page manual, and and then you've got the Korean protocols, and there's certain things that they have expectations for their submissives. And I think it and we all know that the dominant and submissive personalities, those relationships are very unique to each individual.
Mm-hmm. So you're pretty active in your local community. Have you seen any epic fails in this regard in terms of training?
Well, I think that I don't think I see epic fails as far as training. I see epic fails in this as far as communication and people knowing what in the fuck they want. So if you want to say that as an epic fail as training, if you look at training as active negotiation and communication, that's where training fails. Because you've got two people coming in high off the 50 Shades of Grey novels or some other erotica, and they come into this and with these expectations, whether the dominant expects, this, subby sub Sir Dommy Dom expects subby sub, and they get into it, and the day-to-day 24/7 life still have to function within the realm of reality, and they're not fluid enough or don't have adequate communication skills, then I can absolutely see an epic fail. And yes, I have seen those. Mm-hmm. In fact, I actually had one relationship I know of actually made the Oklahoma papers for that, for very similar reasons. And I think that as far as training goes, if you're dominant and you know what in the hell you want and you can communicate that clearly, and you have a submissive, most submissives have a true desire deep in their hearts to please. Mm-hmm. And they have a definite need to be wanted and desired for what they give. And that sense of ownership is inherent within their core. And to have a dominant that will give them direction to be able to fulfill her needs is a beautiful thing. But you have to have good communication.
I think you're right. Well, thanks for calling in and giving us your opinion on this. I appreciate
you betcha.
it.
Thanks for calling. Bye.
Hey, LB, she basically agrees with you that, the first step is to know what the hell you want, right?
Yeah, and that would be, I was going to just make a comment that, I've always said you've got to know what you want, but a lot of times you don't, because some people just don't know exactly what they want. They might think they know, but then when they get it, they don't want it. But, if I were going to be trained by my dominant, I would need very, very clear instructions as to what is expected of me, because I don't like to guess. I usually guess wrong. So that would be important. And my husband even has come to me several times, well, what would you do if I made you do this? And how would you react if I did that? I'm like, just do it. Just please do it. I mean, there's only one way to find out. Don't ask me what I'll do. Just do it, and we'll find out what I'll do, because that's how I learn. I have to do stuff to learn and experience it. I can't just tell you what I'm going to do because I don't know. Just make me do it and see what happens. So.
Well, the downside to this, though, it sounds easy to say, well, you just got to know what you want. But there's a downside to that, and the downside is that a lot of novices get into the lifestyle for the wrong reasons. So what they want, they know what they want. The problem is what they want isn't really a valid reason to get into the lifestyle. Does that make sense? Let me explain. An awful lot of dominance, wannabe dominance. A lot of people who express a desire to become a dominant do that because they think it's going to get them a lot of sex.
Oh, right.
Period. It's just, for them, it's their fantasy to be able to tell women what to do, and they've got to do it.
And I bet a lot of women perceive male dominance that way too.
Well, on the other side, there are a lot of submissives who get into the lifestyle not because they're really submissive, but they want somebody to tell them what to do. They want somebody to fix their problems. They want somebody to take all of the weight of life off of their shoulders and just take responsibility for that, so they can just say, boy, I'm glad I got rid of all those problems. Now it's somebody else's problem, my master's problem.
I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
That's not submission. That's being lazy.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that some people are just, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, as far as the lifestyle needing to be told what to do, I think if you're submissive by nature, I think it's okay to need to be told what to do, but you're right, if you're doing it as an escape and to not have to have any responsibility, that's definitely the wrong reason. But I personally, I'm really attracted to dominant men. I'm attracted to authority, so that kind of stuff. It's not just a sexual turn on. It just makes me feel good to be around people who are very sure of themselves and confident. So, I'm just drawn to people like that. But I think I've told you before, I don't want to be told what to do every second of every day. Don't tell me what to wear. Don't tell me how to do my hair. But I like authority and I like control, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said the other day, confidence is very sexy. Overconfidence is really stupid. And where you draw the line is what's important there. Anyway, we're going to take another real quick break. When we get back, I'm going to tell you what I think about some of this stuff. I've been kind of holding back, but I'll share that with you right after the break. You're listening to Domination Submission Radio. I'm Mike Mackay. My co-host is LB Shaw, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. back. You're listening to Domination Submission Radio. I'm Mike Mackay. My co-host is LB Shaw. I'm going to tell you what I think about a lot of this stuff, but first I'm going to take a call. This call's from Mike in the Netherlands, so let's hear what he's got to say on this subject. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I am better than I deserve.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, LB. I actually just called because I was listening, and of course I had my own question, but as it went along, a new question actually formed.
Okay.
My question is because I've noticed with my own sub, at some point I'm wondering who's the one taking care of who. Of course, they serve the dominant, but on the other side, well, the dominant's supposed to be looking after their submissive.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, the question is actually, how do you teach a sub that is still kind of iffy on the subject, where they're taking care of their submissive, their dom, and then at what point they're supposed to be back down? This is where I'm in charge.
Okay. I'll be honest with you. I think that training is a two-way process. I think that when you are training somebody, whether you're a dominant training a submissive or submissive training another submissive or dominant training a dominant, I think that it all really boils down to making it very clear how somebody gets from point A to point B. It's not necessarily, it's not necessarily laying out a list of things that these are the things you have to do and these are the sort of person you need to be. I think what it is it's a mutual agreement between two people who says, this is where we're at, this is where we want to be, and this is how we get there. And then finding the most effective way to do that. And that's the same with any kind of training. It isn't just DS training or BDSM training. I think any kind of training is the same way. It's a process. And what works for one person might not work for another. So you find the most effective, most viable path to get where you want to be. Simple.
So actually the training, not so much here's a list of things I'm going to teach you, but more or less a sort of, building of a certain character.
Well, I think this is sort of like schools. You can teach a kid how to think and they will teach themselves everything else, or you can try to get them to memorize dates and names. Which one do you think is going to be more effective? I think the bottom line is if you instill the proper attitudes and the proper perspectives and the proper desire to learn in somebody, the rest of it pretty much takes care of itself. Either they will pick it up or they won't, or either they want to or they don't. But you can't carve somebody into your vision of the perfect person. What you do is you teach them how to be a good person. You hope they turn out to be a good person that you can spend some time with. Make sense?
Yes, of course. But I'm going to have, unless you don't have time, there's a question that I actually wanted to ask from the beginning, and you've touched on it a couple of times, and that is, of course, when you're training somebody, sometimes you're training somebody and you're not intentionally keeping them, right? Say I were to be training a submissive because they're new to the lifestyle, and, they're pretty sure that's what they want, so they want to learn the ropes to see if that's really what they want. And often ending up that they'll get attached to the person training them, thinking, this is the person training me, that'll be my master. But how do you prevent that latching on and happening?
Yeah, very, very good question. Tell you what, I'm going to let you go ahead and drop because I know you're calling from Europe, but I'll go ahead and answer, and you can listen to it through the radio rather than the phone. All right, thanks for calling in, Mike, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so that's a really good question. You may start training someone without the intent of owning that person, but either they become attached to you or you become attached to them. What do you think, LB?
Sure, it happens. I think just talking about it earlier, we probably best to keep it at the mindset and learning about, and getting in that right frame of mind to be submissive or service oriented or however you want to put it. But I'm sure that they do get attached to, or develop feelings for each other. But you're saying that it's better to learn from. Didn't you say it was better to learn from someone who was going to be your dominant?
Well, here's where it becomes really important to differentiate between BDSM and DS, okay? For the sake of people who might be new, BDSM is what you do. DS is what you feel and what you think. That's the way I differentiate it. It's maybe overly simplistic, but basically DS is what's happening in your head and in your heart. It's relationship-oriented. BDSM is an activity. It's what you do. It's kind of like the difference between love and sex. You can have both, and it's great when you do, but they're not the same. And when you start mistaking one for the other, that's when you get into trouble, right? When it comes to DS and BDSM, if I'm going to train somebody, we need to be very clear on what I'm training that person on. Am I training you on how to swing a flogger, or am I training you on how to express your love for somebody? Because that's what DS really boils down to. That's how I express my love for somebody, is through DS, a DS relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm teaching somebody how to love, it's going to be hard not to develop some attachment, some feeling, some emotion while that's happening. Wouldn't you say?
Right. I would think so. I mean, even for me, and of course my husband and I love each other, so when we're participating in BDSM activities, for me it's very emotional. I mean, just the activity, but yeah, when you're talking about a lifestyle, I think that it's a lot easier to have that relationship with someone when there are feelings. I think it would be hard for me to be a submissive to someone that I didn't really care about, because I don't know, I guess when I get frustrated, it's going to be easier for me to want to bail.
Well, here also, not only is there a difference between BDSM and DS, but there's a difference between a bottom and a submissive. A submissive, again, this is a relationship-oriented word. A bottom is what you do. A bottom gets spanked. A bottom gets tied up. A bottom gets poked and prodded and swings from the ceiling. A submissive might not do any of that stuff. A submissive might be, for example, we heard Sweet earlier saying that she's a service submissive. Well, they used to have a very technical term for that. It was called a traditional housewife. I'm not trying to oversimplify what Sweet does, because there's much more to her relationship, I'm sure. But the housewife who built her life around pleasing her husband and building a happy home and feathering that nest and cooking and cleaning, and that's what a service submissive is. Somebody who does all that domestic stuff for you and takes joy in it.
And might have vanilla set.
Yeah. There are a lot of people out there who are submissives and they don't even know they're submissives. They're just living that life, and it's perfectly normal for them. And so it's really important, I think, that people are able to separate those things out in their heads and realize that DS, if you want to be trained in that aspect of the lifestyle, the emotional, the relationship aspect of the lifestyle, you have to understand that it's going to be emotional. That's by definition, that's what it is. And also, guess what? It's a relationship. Some people are just bad at relationships. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is. They're bad at normal relationships. They're not going to be any better at these really complex relationships, like a DS relationship or a polyamorous relationship, these relationships where the people in them can't even figure them out. It's easy to say, well, you should know what you want before you go into this. Well, even more basic than that, are you looking to be trained in a relationship, or are you looking to be trained in kinky skills? Bottom line.
Right.
You need to know that before you even figure out the rest of the stuff. I think the best kind of training is kind of like the perfect crime.
You can't tell it. You don't know it's been done or something like that.
The perfect crime is the crime that nobody knows has been committed.
Right.
The best training is training that people don't even realize that is happening, that they don't even realize they're being trained. That's the best kind of training, and yet they can look back and see the results.
I read something about that,
Today, a friend of mine today talking, and he said, this mentoring that you do for me in helping me be a better Dom, is that training? I said, of course it's training. It's informal training.
I had no idea.
It's not like we had sat down and said, okay, here's the contract. I'm going to give you 5 bits of good advice every day, and then you're going to do homework and come back and report them. No, but it's training. It's very informal, but it's offering advice and guidance and mentorship. I think that's one of the best forms of training. I also spoke with a former submissive of mine today. I mentioned tonight's topic, that it was on training, and she said to me, well, I never realized it at the time. It didn't feel like training, but it was. It obviously was. And I think those are the best types of training, is not sitting somebody at a desk and having them write 50 times on a chalkboard, I will not sass my master. I think that the best training is training that happens very subtly but still produces results. And the bottom line is, if you're looking to change your life and be a better submissive or be a better dominant, the best change is going to come from within you. You got to change your thoughts and your perceptions first before you can change your persona, your outward persona, and then the rest is going to be pretty easy. What do you think, LB?
I agree. I had some other comments, but there's no time. But I agree. I think you've got to have that mindset, and the rest should be kind of natural to that.
You've been listening to Domination Submission Radio. My name is Mike Mackay. My co-host is L.B. Shaw. We hope you'll tune in every week and have a great night.